Members, like all of you, I've watched in horror what I've seen happening in Ukraine and what Vladimir Putin has done. And I've been here now, I guess, a little over 20 years in the House, and I don't think I've ever done a resolution like this before. But it really came about as a result with a lot of conversations with folks, frankly, on both sides of the aisle about the importance of us taking a stand in this. You know, we talk about a lot of the problems that we recognize that we have in our state and we have in our nation. But when we see what's happening, really not that far away, just across the Atlantic, with what's happening by a regime, a totalitarian regime that is attacking innocent folks, that just yesterday bombed a maternity ward, it shocks the conscience. And it kind of sets a lot of the differences that we have a lot in perspective when you see that. And as a result of those conversations, I thought it was very important that we take a stand on this, that we take a stand on a number of things. Number one, to outright condemn what Russia is doing. Number two, to make clear that the people of Ukraine understand that we support them. There's a lot of complexities with the geopolitical situation that we have, and there's a lot of things that are way outside the ability of this General Assembly to deal with. But I think those statements are very important. But I do think the statements that are in there that have to do with energy are equally important. And while there can be debates about what energy is the energy of the future, what path we should go, all those kinds of things which are reasonable minds can always disagree. It seems clear to me right now that we as a nation must be energy independent. That right now means fossil fuels, but it also means transition to other forms of energy as well. It means green energy. It means all of the above, just like the energy bill that this House overwhelmingly passed a few months ago. That's what our nation should do. But a couple of stats about where we are and why this is so complicated, particularly, and why we have to get this under control as a matter of national security. You know, just in the last year and a half, we've had a pipeline that was canceled. We've had a moratorium put in place on oil and gas leasing. We've had all of these restrictions put in place. And just to give you some data, from 2017 until 2020, the U.S. actually reduced its imports of oil from Russia by 9%, reduced it. Since 2021, we have increased those by 7.7%, so we're now back up. Just a couple years ago, gas was averaging $2.48 a gallon. Today, as you ride around, it's over $4 a gallon today. You know, this is something that's hurting everyone. It's hurting particularly those who can least afford to be hurt through these costs, those who are on fixed incomes, those who are barely making enough to get by as it is, those simply trying to drive to work, take their children where they need to go, who can barely afford to do so. So it's important that that energy conversation be a part of this as well, because as long as we are not energy independent, as long as we are not in a position to help our allies with our vast natural resources to also be able to rely on us instead of foreign actors who would wish all of us ill, we can't have true national security. And that's why it's important that we have that conversation. But I do recognize that there's more to it than that, and that the future also encompasses a lot of other things. So I would say it needs to be all of the above. But from an immediate nature, from an immediate issue, we need to deal with a significant shortage of oil and gas. We've got to become independent, and we have the resources to do it. It's kind of like we're fighting with one hand tied behind our back, and we cannot allow that to stand. And I think it's important that we send that message to Washington that they need to change their position on it and do better on that, because it's not only about the economy, but it's truly, as I think you can clearly see, about the national security of this nation and frankly the world. A couple things about what's happening in Ukraine. I'm sure if I asked everybody, and I'm not, if I were to ask everyone to raise their hand and say who's watched this either online or television, everybody would raise their hand. Folks are talking about it because it's brought back something that we hadn't talked about in years. It's bringing back the Cold War, things that a lot of folks thought just we would never have to even think about again, that we hoped we wouldn't have to. But it's here. It's a reality that's staring us down. And it affects the people of this state, not only through energy, but through the other issues that come about as a result of it. We have a significant presence of military, of active duty, of reservists, guardsmen, and families in this state whose lives are going to be directly affected by this. So while it is a geopolitical issue international scale, it's something that actually applies to every person in this state. And I think it's important that we send this strong message. But what's amazing to me, what's tragic among a number of things, if you look at where we are, we as a society value life. We have debates on different things, but an underlying premise is we as an American society value life. If you look, and there's a number of veterans in here, there's a number of folks who are still in the military. And one of the concepts that is taught to our military is to try to avoid collateral damage, to try to avoid civilian injuries and civilian death. And what we're seeing happening just across the ocean, a 10-hour flight, is there's no distinctions being made. In fact, many would argue, and I think the evidence shows, that Putin is actually targeting civilians. Just a reckless and ruthless and frankly bloodthirsty campaign of what we're seeing. And it's a situation that there can be no moral ambiguity about where we should stand. And we should condemn it in every way possible and by any means possible. But I'll tell you, it's one of those things that it makes me grateful to live in the nation we are, to have the God-given freedoms that we have, to have the ability to disagree, to have the rights that we have and that we hold so dear. And it also reminds me of why we're so fortunate to have those and why we need to take this position we have and help those who need that help and try to help continue spreading freedom around the world and fighting totalitarianism. My friends, again, I know this is an unusual resolution to bring before the State Assembly, but I do believe it's something that's important, and I think it's important that we make a stand, that we take a strong position, and we do so unequivocally. With that, I urge your support.